Just one decision, and the whole world pays the price. 1. Banning cats because of demons. In the year 1233, amid the deeply superstitious atmosphere of medieval Europe, where religious power reigned supreme, Pope Gregory IX issued the decree Vox in Rama, which described demonic rituals featuring the image of the black cat as the embodiment of Satan, as a warning to the faithful against heresy. Although the text did not explicitly call for the killing of cats, this accusation sparked widespread hunts and massacres of black cats across both cities and countryside. Creatures once considered companions were now bound, burned, and thrown into rivers. The ecological consequence was inevitable. The absence of cats, the natural predators of rats, allowed the rodent population to explode. These rats carried fleas infected with Yersinia pestis, the direct cause of the Black Death, 1347 to 1351, the terrifying plague that devastated Europe in the 14th century. As trading ships from the Far East reached European ports, the plague spread rapidly via rats, killing an estimated 25 to 50 million people, roughly one-third of the continent's population in that time, in just a few years. In despair, people became even more convinced that cats were the source of the disease, continuing to hunt and exterminate them. Many also scapegoated Jewish communities, which led to brutal, superstition-driven massacres. This event illustrates how a single decision driven by superstition, when paired with absolute power, can trigger an unprecedented biological catastrophe, reminding us of the vital importance of reason and science in preserving the natural balance. 2. Napoleon sells Louisiana. At the turn of 1803, with the French treasury drained by endless campaigns across Europe, Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte stunned friend and foe alike by offering to sell the vast territory of Louisiana, more than 2 million square kilometers stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, to the fledgling United States for a mere $15 million. What began as a quick fix to raise cash for war payments instantly reshaped a continent. In a single stroke, America's land area doubled, igniting a surge of westward migration, opening fertile plains to settlers, and prompting President Thomas Jefferson to commission the legendary Lewis and Clark expedition to chart this sprawling new domain. New Orleans, once threatened by European tolls, blossomed into a bustling port connecting the heartland to global markets. Yet this expansive boon came at a grave cost. Countless Native American nations were uprooted from ancestral lands, their cultures and livelihoods irrevocably disrupted, and the question of slavery's expansion into the new territories fueled bitter national debates that ultimately erupted into the Civil War. Over the ensuing decades, the resources and strategic depth secured by the purchase underpinned America's emergence as the dominant power in North America and, by the 20th century, as a global superpower. Napoleon's seemingly expedient decision, driven by the exigencies of European warfare, thus cast a long shadow over history, illustrating how a single, short-term financial maneuver can reverberate through the centuries and permanently alter the balance of world power. 3. Preemptive strike. In the pre-dawn hours of December 7, 1941, over 350 Japanese bombers and fighters, launched in near silence from 6 aircraft carriers lurking beyond the Hawaiian horizon, swooped down on Pearl Harbor, the crown jewel of America's Pacific Fleet. Guided by Premier Tojo Hideki and his War Council of Militarists, Imperial Japan had wagered that a sudden knockout blow would cripple U.S. naval power, so panic in Washington, and grant Tokyo free rein to consolidate its hold over Southeast Asia's rich resources. Over the next 2 hours, torpedoes and bombs ripped through battleships moored in long liner rows, shattering the USS Arizona in a towering inferno, sinking or crippling nearly half the fleet, and killing some 2,400 sailors and airmen. The following day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, in what he famously dubbed the Day of Infamy, secured a declaration of war, thrusting the United States fully into World War II's global crucible. For 4 brutal years, American and Allied forces fought island by island across the Pacific, from Guadalcanal's jungles to Iwo Jima's volcanic slopes, at staggering cost in lives and materiel. By mid-1945, with conventional invasion estimated to claim hundreds of thousands more Allied and Japanese lives, U.S. leadership authorized the Manhattan Project's ultimate test, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, Little Boy incinerated Hiroshima in an instant flash, killing some 70,000 people outright. 3 days later, Fat Man obliterated Nagasaki, claiming another 40 slaves. Confronted with this new specter of annihilation, Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, ending the war, but ushering in the nuclear age. This chain of events, from a tactical gambit at Pearl Harbor to the apocalyptic power of atomic weapons, reveals how a single preemptive strike can trigger a cascade of unforeseen, devastating consequences, forever altering the course of history. 4. Selling the rights to manufacture guns to the wrong person. In the mid-19th century, as conflicts in Europe and the United States claimed hundreds of thousands of soldiers' lives each year, Dr. Richard Gatling, Believing that a single Gatling gun operated by a few men could replace the efforts of thousands of riflemen, built the first Gatling gun in 1862. 2 decades later, engineer Hiram Maxim advanced the concept with his Maxim machine gun 1884, which used the gas pressure from each fired cartridge to automatically load and fire in rapid succession, unleashing a rain of bullets that dominated battlefields. These weapons during World War I turned Verdun and the Somme into seas of blood, with tens of thousands of soldiers killed in mere hours of fighting. By 1947, in the Soviet Union's post-World War II reconstruction, engineer Mikhail Kalashnikov introduced the AK-47, a simple, durable design that could be mass-produced inexpensively and would function reliably, even under the harshest conditions. Thanks to its low cost and dependability, the AK-47 quickly spread worldwide, becoming the weapon of choice for both formal armies and guerrilla forces. However, rather than reducing human losses, these inventions helped escalate the scale and ferocity of modern warfare. The Maxim gun caused tens of thousands of battlefield deaths during concentrated assaults, and the AK-47, with an estimated production exceeding 100 million rifles, has been directly or indirectly responsible for more than 250,000 deaths per year over the past half-century. This history serves as a warning that any weapons technology, no matter how noble its original intent to protect or reduce casualties, can become a horrific tool of slaughter if it falls into the wrong hands, reminding us to weigh the ethical and social consequences carefully before bestowing destructive power upon any new invention. 5. The tragedy of the Rwandan genocide. At the end of 1993, amid escalating political tensions in Rwanda, the United Nations deployed a small peacekeeping force under the command of Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire. At that time, Dallaire received an urgent cable, later dubbed the Genocide Fax, warning that extremist Hutu groups were plotting to exterminate the Tutsi, stockpiling weapons, and compiling lists of enemies to be eliminated. Dallaire requested authority to access ammunition caches and to arrest ringleaders, but the United Nations headquarters in New York and member states hesitated, citing restrictive Chapter 6 mandates and concerns that the mission would amount to internal intervention. In April 1994, when President Juvenal Habyarimana was killed in a plane shoot, Hutu militias immediately launched their killing campaign. The next 100 days, more than 800,000 people, mostly Tutsi, were slaughtered with machetes, knives, and firearms, while women were subjected to mass rape. The peacekeepers, lacking any mandate for armed intervention to protect civilians, could only stand by and report. It was only after the atrocity had reached its zenith and global public outcry finally mounted that a larger force was rushed in, too late to save hundreds of thousands of lives. This tragedy underscores the lesson that excessive caution and awaiting perfect authorization can render international organizations silent accomplices, allowing genocide to unfold before their very eyes without timely action. 6. Britain's promise. In the aftermath of World War I, the British Empire found itself administering the former Ottoman province of Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. Yet, in an effort to satisfy competing interests, British officials made conflicting promises. They assured Arab leaders of independence and self-determination in exchange for support against the Ottomans. They endorsed the Balfour Declaration of 1917, pledging a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, and at the same time maintained colonial control through their mandate authority. None of these commitments were clearly defined or reconciled. Arabs expected sovereignty over the land they had inhabited for centuries. Jews anticipated mass immigration and statehood, and Britain sought to balance both promises while safeguarding its own strategic interests. In the Suez Canal and oil fields, as tensions mounted during the 1920s and 1930s, marked by intercommunal violence, revolts, and heavy-handed British responses, the unresolved contradictions at the heart of British policy laid the groundwork for deeper conflict. When the British withdrew in 1948 and the United Nations voted to partition Palestine, war erupted immediately between the newly declared State of Israel and neighboring Arab armies. Over the decades that followed, successive wars in 1948, 1956, 1967, 1973, and ongoing insurgencies between Israel, Palestinian groups like Hamas, and regional powers have resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths and entrenched animosities. The Middle East remains mired in instability to this day, a testament to how ambiguous, overlapping political promises made for short-term expediency can ignite a century of violence and suffering. 7. Gallipoli. In the spring of 1915, with the Western Front mired in attritional trench warfare and Russia pleading for desperately needed supplies, Britain's First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, proposed a dramatic gamble to force open the Dardanelles Strait by mounting an amphibious assault on the Gallipoli Peninsula in Ottoman-controlled Turkey. The logic was compelling. Turkish defenses were thought to be thin, and a successful landing would knock the Ottomans out of the war, secure a maritime supply line to the Eastern Front, and potentially bring neutral Balkan states into the Allied fold. On April 25, 1915, British, Australian, and New Zealand Army Corps troops hit the beaches at dawn, only to find themselves under relentless rifle and artillery fire from Ottoman soldiers entrenched on steep ridges and hidden behind razor wire. Intelligence failures had underestimated the terrain's treacherous cliffs, and the defenders' resolve. Logistical plans faltered as transport ships struggled to unload men and munitions under constant bombardment. Heat, disease, and relentless enemy fire sapped morale, transforming what was envisioned as a swift 2-week operation into a grinding 8-month ordeal. Repeated counterattacks and limited gains bled Allied forces, who suffered over 200,000 casualties, while the Ottoman army, buoyed by commanders like Mustafa Kemal, held its ground. In December 1915 and January 1916, under cover of darkness, Allied units withdrew with minimal fanfare but maximum loss. Gallipoli became immortalized as a strategic blunder and a humanitarian tragedy, a stark reminder that even the boldest plans can founder without accurate intelligence, robust logistics, and attention to soldiers' endurance. 8. No carts in Madrid. In the summer of 1590, as Madrid sweltered under a stifling heat wave, the city's narrow, winding streets became breeding grounds for a fast-spreading cholera epidemic. Desperate to halt the disease, the municipal council decreed a total ban on all horse-drawn carts entering the city limits, an attempt to minimize contact between rural, contaminated zones and the urban populace. Only pedestrians, donkeys, and handcarts were allowed through the gates. At first glance, the policy seemed prudent. Fewer vehicles, fewer germs carried into the crowded capital. But almost immediately, the consequences proved disastrous. Madrid relied on external sources for its most basic needs: clean water from nearby springs, grain from Castile's wheat fields, firewood from the Sierra de Guadarrama. With heavy wagons turned away, hundreds of tons of vital supplies piled up outside city walls. Public wells ran nearly dry as water distributors, unable to transport barrels through the gates, abandoned their carts. Households, unable to boil what little water they had, reverted to using stagnant puddles. Hearths went cold when woodcutters could no longer deliver firewood for cooking and warmth. Within weeks, the cholera outbreak, fueled by dehydration, malnutrition, and rampant filth, spread with renewed fury. Narrow alleys filled with discarded refuse and chamber pot waste, while famished citizens fought over scraps of bread. Medical practitioners, few and poorly trained, watched helplessly as mortality climbed. Over the ensuing 3 months, more than 30,000 men, women, and children perished, their bodies left to rot in hastily dug mass graves as the city's infrastructure collapsed under the strain. Finally, in desperation, the council revoked the ban, reopening the gates to water carts, grain convoys, and fuel wagons. Emergency relief teams distributed supplies, and makeshift hospitals were established in convents and monasteries. Gradually, the epidemic waned, but the legacy of the No Carts Edict endured as a grim cautionary tale. It starkly illustrates that public health measures, however well-intentioned, must never ignore the basic necessities of daily life: food and warmth. When authorities prioritize containment over sustenance, they risk turning a manageable outbreak into an unmitigated humanitarian catastrophe. 9. Mao. At the end of 1957, as China reveled in its ambition to catch up with the Western powers at lightning speed, Chairman Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward 1958-1962 with an extraordinarily bold goal: the total collectivization of agriculture and rapid industrialization on all fronts. The state confiscated the farms of tens of millions of peasants, organized them into large-scale communes, and simultaneously ordered every village and township to build steel furnaces, regardless of local conditions or available resources. Under intense pressure to meet quotas, grassroots cadres reported abnormally high grain yields, even as granaries lay nearly empty, and the central government, trusting these reports, continued to export rice in exchange for foreign currency. When droughts and floods struck, actual production collapsed and food supplies became so scarce that impoverished families resorted to eating grass, dry roots, and even animal carcasses to survive. Meanwhile, citizens drafted into steel production. Ordinary farmers could not tend their fields, further devastating the harvests. Over the next 3 years, an estimated 20 to 45 million people died from starvation or malnutrition, marking one of the greatest humanitarian disasters of the 20th century. By 1962, the government was forced to acknowledge its failure and gradually dismantle the coercive communes, allowing the country to begin recovering. The Great Leap Forward stands as a sobering warning. Any economic policy that places politics above the realities of production and the basic rights of citizens can lead to an irreversible catastrophe. That's all for today. See you next video.